Triple G back to the MLS. Triple G back to the MLS with the Chicago Fire. Not confirmed yet, but local reports are mentioning that Chicago have had multiple meetings and believe that they are very close to hiring Gregg Berhalter as both their head coach and chief soccer officer. The first question for you, why am I all knowing and when does my payment come in from Chicago for using my information and my expertise on what they need?
This guy gets one prediction right out of like 15. He's like, I am Nostradamus. Everybody
I mean,
must
listen,
follow what I say.
listen, all I'm saying is I trimmed up this more, as you can see, beard gone, and I had a mustache here. And I was like, you know what? With that prediction that I made, I might have the inside scoop. I might need to go the Tommy Scoops route, big mustache and the whole 9 yards. But
You
then
could
I
be
was
his
like, you know what?
apprentice.
I'll give him his thing. I'll give him his time, and I'll start my own thing. Maybe like cool sideways hat guy.
Oh God. What's up, fellow kids?
Hello, my fellow youth. How are how are you today?
That's you showing
No,
up to the
let's
that's you showing up to the meeting of the insiders. You're like, "What's up, fellow insiders?
yeah.
What's the
Hello, my
scoop?"
fellow soccer news journalists. Oh man. Let's chat about this, right? We talked about this on episode 263. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. When he was removed from the USMNT, we talked about what his legacy would be and what comes next. And I came out and said that he would be a guy who gets this reputation for coming in when times are not great, turning around the culture and getting them back on track, as the kids say, and trying to fit in with the youth, right? Will he create MLS Cup winners, Supporter Shield winners, US Open Cup, Leagues Cup? Maybe not. But sometimes you need that guy in the middle to help right the ship and get you going forward instead of standing still or backwards. And I have always believed that Gregg is that guy. He came in after the 2018 disappointment, not qualifying for the World Cup, brand new crop of teenagers who had little to no international experience, turned them into the best team in CONCACAF, who finally beat Mexico convincingly and consecutively, time and time again. And they believed they were a legitimate contender for everything that they played for. They qualified for and got out of the group in the World Cup of 2022. And at that point, he was set. He did his job, and they should have moved on. They didn't. We saw what happened. It was a disaster. But before his second cycle started, he got them to a much better point than when he took over. And that is what he can do. So long as you don't hold on too long, he could be a really good addition for a team looking to turn things around. And that is the definition of Chicago. What are your thoughts on this possible signing, not confirmed yet?
If you had told me he was coming in after the first stint with USMNT, I'd feel more positive about it. But because he's coming off that god awful stint with the US in his second stint, I don't feel good about this at all. I get where you're coming from in terms of him being a guy that can right the ship, but not necessarily the guy to take you to the promised land. I'm not 100% convinced yet that he can be the guy to come in and right the ship. I think he was good, not great with his time in Columbus, but that was from 2013 to 2018. This is a whole new MLS ball game from that time. It's just, I think there's a little bit less parity. I think there's a lot more quality. And I think the way that the game is played is a bit different. And I'm not sure that his style of play is going to transition too well to this more modern version of MLS where it's less like kick and run, whereas that's kind of the vibe I get from Gregg's tactics is a little bit more on the side of kick and run. And I think that's going to get exposed. And Chicago is not an easy place to come in and fix up right now because this team is in a really rough shape. They haven't been good for a long time. The team is in terrible form. They could potentially be on pace to finish bottom of the East. It's a lot of work to do. I'm not 100% convinced that Gregg's the guy to turn that around. He's coming in with bad momentum, as I was talking about before. Really poor stint. I don't like it. I'll just conclude it with that. I don't like it.
This is why I'm the host and you're the guy who brings in the bad takes.
No, you're just the guy that can't say anything bad about anybody. So you're gonna be like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
Gregg could do a good job. He's gonna inspire them with the power of teamwork and the power of his sick shoes.
It's not the six shoes, it's not the power of teamwork. It's the backwards passes. What the problem with Chicago is that their restarts are too slow, and when Gregg gets a backward pass going, it cuts 0.34 seconds off of every restart, which will be the. No, I'm just kidding.
Sign
Um,
this man as a ball boy then. Get him as a ball boy.
no, listen. So here, is it a good landing spot? Yes and no, and here's why. Chicago have made the playoffs twice in the last 15 years, zero times since 2017, almost a decade of playoff drought, constantly at the bottom of the conference. No matter who they buy, they never put it together. Not only does Gregg come in as the head coach who is going to create tactics to make this team successful, he's also the chief soccer officer who's in charge of bringing players in and encouraging other players to, or other people to help buy the players that he needs. So he's got a little bit more control than in past, and we can talk to our Chicago friends about it. But what it feels like in Chicago is that there was always disconnect between what the coach wanted, who was they were willing to buy, and what path they were going down. Having it more consolidated could be a better path forward for Gregg and Chicago. But regardless of that, as we talked about, he took people who had a ton of potential and made them into one of the best teams in the regions. His tactics were simple and can be successfully implemented in MLS with a group of players who are not that good. MLS experience is a plus because they've tried multiple coaches who have not had MLS experience and they've failed. Now, that's not an end all be all because Frank Klopas is here again and still not being successful, right? But here's the problem why I don't think it might be a good fit is because Chicago, as I was actually editing this clip for TikTok, holding on to people too long, Shaqiri as the focus of people who stick around too long. Chicago have a history of doing that, and not only just Shaqiri, but see pretty much every designated player they've had in history. Once Gregg has gotten them to the playoffs, or at least being competitive again, they might think that he's the person to bring him into the next phase, competing for championships and winning titles. Now, I'm not sure that he is, nor do I think that he cannot be. Like, I'm not saying he is or he isn't, or it can or cannot be. My gut feeling is he isn't. He's, as I mentioned, he's just the middle guy. But Chicago have this thing where it's like, oh, you had a semi decent run. Here's another extended contract, right?
5 year contract.
Yeah. They, well, and I made my joke here is that not a 5 year contract. Chicago could end up giving him a lifetime contract, pay him in really cool shoes, and then call it a day. But my worry is that he sticks around too long. He does a good job, like he did with the men's national team, takes Chicago from bottom of the East to just ahead of the playing games, like five, six, seven in the East, right? That is Gregg's job, and I think he can do that. I don't even want to say with ease, but I think he can do that. The problem will be is if they try to keep him around to get them from five, six, seven to one, two, three. I don't think he can do that, even though he's shown that he can do that in the past. I don't know if he's got that in him. I think it's a good move, and I say good, not great, because I don't love the dual role job, right? Because when it comes to the next phase that we're talking about, the person who's in charge of hiring the guy to take them there is the chief soccer officer. So we've seen it with Peter Vermees and friends, where he's been around for about 1.5 years. That's because there's nobody above him who's like, maybe we should look somewhere else, because the guy who's saying we should look somewhere else is him, and that is Gregg. So, in true Triple G fashion, the litmus test for who could be a better coach than Gregg Berhalter will be Gregg Berhalter. And we're just going in circles again. So, I,
That's
I, I
like
think it's good.
that's the USMNT. Remember when they were looking for a coach and they
But
compared it to
that's
Gregg
what
and they
that's
were
what
like,
yeah
"Oh, look, Gregg compares to Gregg."
that's
That's
well
what he's gonna be
that's what
doing.
I'm Well, that's exactly what I was referring to is the fact that he goes through the whole USMNT cycle, and when they finally let him go after round one, it's like, all right, who are we going to measure up against? Gregg. And who hits all the boxes Gregg hitting on before? Wait, he scored 100%. How did that work? We got to bring him back. So they bring him back. The same thing's happening in Chicago. It's like, all right, I'm the CSO. I got to bring in a new coach after this, or I need to extend it. Let's compare it by a rubric based off of the old coach. Old coach got us to fifth place. This guy, Gregg Berhalter, has a resume where just last year he got a team like Chicago Fire, to fifth place. That's exactly what we're looking for. Let's bring him back again. Like it's just woo, round and round we go.
That's like, do
Um,
you know do you know the meme of Obama putting the medal on himself? That's
yes,
Gregg
that's
hiring
exactly
himself as the coach. Someone
perfect.
should
That's
make
exactly.
that.
Yes, we should. I said this 20 episodes ago, and I'll say it again. Gregg's reputation is as a rebuilder. He comes in, turns the ships around, and leave. His problems come when he sticks around too long, and his ideas become stale. I think Chicago need him to turn the ship around, but they don't need him to turn it around and then drive it. They just need to turn it around because if he starts driving it, it's going to go down to the bottom of the sea. So I think the dual role is a mistake, but I think short-term benefits outweigh that if they don't hold on too long. So I'm going to say good move.
I still don't. I mean, I think somewhat along the lines of what you're saying, but still don't think it's a good move. But we'll have to wait and see. Only time will tell.
Time will tell indeed.